My name is Martha Reynolds, and I am 78 years old. For most of my life, I was the quiet force behind my family's success, cooking meals, babysitting grandkids, and making sure no one ever lacked anything. I lived alone in my large Victorian house after my husband passed away. I thought my golden years would be filled with peace. But instead, they were almost stolen from me by the very person I raised with my own hands, my only son, David. The room was silent except for the sound of my cane tapping on the marble floor as I entered the attorney's office. Heads turned, jaws dropped. Everyone, my son, his greedy wife, and a few other relatives, stared as if they had seen a ghost. They were pale, trembling, frozen in their seats. Why? 'Cause they thought I was dead. David shot up from his chair, knocking over a glass of water. Mum, he stammered, his voice shaking. His wife clutched his arm, her face drained of color. This isn't possible, she whispered. The lawyer looked at me, stunned, before glancing back at the stack of documents in front of him. Mrs. Reynolds, he asked cautiously, as if he needed to confirm I was real. I nodded slowly, my eyes locked on my son's guilty face. You see, my son had gone to great lengths to declare me dead. He forged documents, arranged for a fake death certificate, and even went as far as staging an accident while I was out of town. All so he could claim my will, my house, and the inheritance I had worked so hard for. I stood there, alive and breathing, while the lawyer held the papers that were supposed to transfer everything I owned into my son's name. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the anger and betrayal burning inside me. I looked straight at David and said, "You wanted me gone, didn't you? Well, here I am." The room was thick with tension. No one spoke. You could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. My son's hands shook as he tried to come up with an excuse. "Mom, I thought you." "Don't you dare," I cut him off. My voice was steady, cold. "You thought you could bury me alive and take what's mine. But you underestimated me." His wife muttered under her breath, "This can't be happening." Oh, it was happening. And I was just getting started. They thought I was dead, but I was very much alive. And I wasn't just there to stop the reading of the will. I was there to expose everything. But how did it come to this? How did a loving son turn into a man who would fake his mother's death for money? What they didn't know was that I had been watching, planning, and waiting for this very moment. The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should pause for a moment." I leaned on my cane and took a step forward, my eyes never leaving my son's. "No," I said firmly. "We won't pause. You're going to hear the truth today." The truth was darker than anyone in that room could have imagined. Because this betrayal didn't happen overnight. It began long before that day. With small lies, little manipulations, and moments I chose to ignore. Until they almost cost me my life. And what happened the night David thought he got rid of me? That's a story you won't believe. Stay with me because what I'm about to tell you will shake you to your core. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding as the memories flooded back. It all started months ago, with a simple phone call that changed everything. But before I tell you how I survived, you need to know the kind of woman I used to be, and the kind of son I raised. Because my story, it's only just beginning. Will David pay for what he did? Or will he find a way to silence me once and for all? You'll find out in the next chapter. If you were in my shoes, what would you do to a child who betrayed you like this? Comment below where you're watching from and share your thoughts. I was born and raised in a small town where everyone knew each other, where your reputation was as valuable as gold. My parents taught me the value of hard work and honesty, and I passed those lessons on to my son, David. Least I thought I had. David was my pride and joy. His father and I sacrificed everything to give him the best life possible. We sent him to the best schools, made sure he never lacked anything. I worked 2 jobs at one point, cleaning houses during the day and sewing at night, just to keep things afloat. I told myself it was worth it because David would one day make us proud. And for a while he did. He became a successful businessman, married a beautiful woman named Claire, and together they had 2 kids. I thought my son had grown into a good man. But as the years went on, I started to notice something unsettling. David stopped calling unless he needed money. Claire always had a way of talking down to me like I was some burden. Still, I kept quiet. I told myself it was just life. Families drift apart sometimes. But then came the day he asked me about my will. We were sitting in my kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air, when he casually said, "Mom, have you updated your will recently?" His tone was light, but there was something in his eyes, something calculating. I brushed it off, saying, "I haven't thought about it much." "Why?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, just in case. You're not getting any younger." The words stung, but I ignored them. I told myself he was just being practical. From that day, things changed. David started visiting more often, but not out of love. He would snoop around the house, asking questions about my bank accounts, my property, even the jewelry his father had given me. Claire would whisper things when she thought I wasn't listening. Comments about how, "This house is too big for an old woman," or "One day this will all be ours." The final straw came one evening when I overheard them arguing in the hallway. Claire hissed, "Why wait? She's old. She won't last long. We need that money now." David replied, "I'm working on it. Just trust me." My heart sank. My own son. The boy I raised with so much love, plotting against me with his wife. I wanted to confront them right then, but I held back. I needed proof. I needed to be smart. That night I called an old friend, Detective James, who had retired but still had connections. I told him everything, every suspicion, every whispered conversation. He told me to be careful, to watch my back, because sometimes greed makes people do unspeakable things. And he was right. A few weeks later, David invited me to spend the weekend at a cabin he had rented. He said it was for bonding, just the two of us. My gut told me not to go, but I agreed. I wanted to see how far he would go. The cabin was remote, surrounded by thick woods. The first night was quiet, almost too quiet. David was overly sweet, cooking dinner, pouring wine. But I noticed he kept checking his watch, texting someone when he thought I wasn't looking. The next morning he suggested we go hiking. My knees weren't what they used to be, but I agreed. Halfway up the trail, I slipped on a loose rock, and as I struggled to get up, I saw it, the look in his eyes. "Cole, me." Instead of helping me, he stepped back. "Mom," he said, voice flat, "maybe it's better this way." He walked away, leaving me on that trail, injured and alone. I dragged myself back to the cabin, every step fueled by anger. When I got there, David was gone. His car, his bag, everything. He had left me to die. But I didn't die. Hiker found me hours later and called for help. While I recovered in the hospital, I knew I couldn't go back home. If David thought I was dead, I would let him believe it. I needed time to plan. With Detective James' help, we forged a plan of our own. I disappeared, changed my phone, stayed with a trusted friend, and watched as David filed the paperwork to have me declared legally dead. He staged my funeral. Can you imagine the pain of hearing about your own funeral? Seeing pictures of your son crying fake tears while plotting to take everything you worked for? I stayed hidden, gathering evidence. I recorded phone calls, took photos of forged documents, even got my hands on the fake death certificate. Every piece of evidence was like a knife in my heart, but I knew it would all be worth it. Finally, the day came, the reading of the will. David walked in, confident, ready to claim everything. Claire smirked, thinking she had won. But then I walked through that door. You should have seen their faces. And this, my dear listeners, is where my plan truly begins. Because exposing him at the will reading was just the start. I still had more to reveal, more to take back. What do you think David will do now that he knows I'm alive? Will he beg for forgiveness, or try something even worse? Stay tuned for the next chapter, because the storm has only just begun. If you were me, would you forgive him, or would you make him pay? Comment where you're watching from and tell me what you do. The silence after my entrance at the will reading was deafening. I could feel every eye in that room burning into me, some with shock, others with fear, and a few, like the lawyer's, with cautious curiosity. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Claire gripped his arm so tight her knuckles turned white. "You're supposed to be dead," David whispered, his voice trembling. I tilted my head slightly, my lips curling into the smallest smile. "Surprise," I said. The lawyer looked between us, his hands fidgeting with the papers. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said carefully, "you were presumed deceased." "Clearly that was a mistake," I replied coldly. "But not an innocent one." My eyes locked on David. "Tell them, son. Tell them how you tried to kill me." He stammered, his face twisting with anger and desperation. "That's not true. Mom, you fell. It was an accident. I went to get help." "Liar!" I snapped, slamming my cane against the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small office. "You left me there to die." Claire stood, her voice sharp. "This is insane. You're just an old woman making up stories. You've always been paranoid." The lawyer raised a hand. "Please everyone, calm down." But his voice was drowned out by the tension thick enough to choke on. I took a slow breath, reminding myself to stay in control. I turned to the lawyer. "I have evidence," I said firmly. "Recordings, documents, even witnesses." David's face drained of color. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I said, my eyes narrowing. "You should have learned by now. Never underestimate me." The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting until—" "No," I interrupted. "We're not rescheduling anything. They tried to steal my life, my home, my legacy. I'm not leaving this room until the truth is heard." My voice was strong, but inside my heart pounded. Memories of that night in the cabin flooded back. The cold air, the pain in my legs, the terror of being left alone to die. But that terror had transformed into something else. Determination. Everyone stared at me, waiting for my next move. Slowly, I pulled out a small voice recorder from my purse and pressed play. The room filled with David's voice. "She's old, Claire. She won't last long. Once she's gone, everything is ours." Claire's voice followed. "Then make it happen, David. I'm tired of waiting." The lawyer's eyes widened. Claire gasped, covering her mouth, while David lunged toward me. "Where did you get that?" he shouted. I stepped back, clutching the recorder. "Stay away from me," I warned, my voice like steel. "This is just the beginning." The lawyer stood. "Mr. Reynolds, sit down. This is very serious." But David didn't sit. His breathing was heavy, his fists clenched. I could see it in his eyes. He was cornered, and cornered animals are dangerous. I knew then that I couldn't stay there much longer. Not with him so close. Not with the anger boiling inside him. I turned to the lawyer. "This meeting is over. We'll continue this in court, with the authorities present." As I walked toward the door, I felt David's glare burning into my back. "You'll regret this," he growled. I stopped and looked over my shoulder. "No, David," I said softly. "You will." I stepped out into the cool air, my heart pounding. I had exposed part of the truth, but this was far from over. I knew my son. He wasn't going to give up easily. That night, as I sat in my friend's house, safe but restless, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A voice I didn't recognize spoke. "You should stop what you're doing, Martha. Or you'll end up dead for real this time." My hand shook as I hung up. Someone else was involved. Someone who didn't want the truth to come out. It wasn't just David and Claire. The web was bigger than I thought. And now, I was in real danger. Will I be able to expose them before they silence me forever? Or will my son's greed finally consume everything, including me? Stay with me, because what comes next will shock you. If you were in my place, would you keep fighting or run away to save yourself? Comment below where you're watching from and tell me your thoughts. The night after the threatening call, I barely slept. Every creak in the old wooden floor made me jump. Every shadow felt like someone lurking outside the window. My heart was in constant turmoil. Not because I feared death, but because I refused to let my son win. At dawn I called Detective James. His voice was calm but firm. "Martha, you need to take this seriously. If they sent you a threat, they're desperate. Desperate people are dangerous." "I'm not running," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "I've lived too long to die a coward." He sighed. "Then we'll do this smart. I'll assign a man to keep an eye on you. And Martha, don't trust anyone, not even family." His words stung, but they were true. David was still my blood, but he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Later that day I drove past my own house. It was strange, seeing it from the outside as if it no longer belonged to me. My roses were dying, the grass was overgrown. Claire had clearly taken no care of the home I had cherished for decades. Through the window, I saw David pacing while yelling into his phone. He looked like a man crumbling under the weight of his own lies. I wanted to storm in, but James's words echoed in my mind. "Not yet." Instead, I went to the bank to secure my assets. The manager, an old friend of mine, was shocked to see me alive. "Martha," he whispered, glancing around, "they came here with your death certificate last week. They almost cleaned out your accounts." My blood boiled. "Freeze everything," I ordered. "No one touches a dime without my consent." By the time I left the bank, I felt a small surge of power. They wanted my money so badly. Now they'd have to fight me for every penny. That evening I received a message from James. "Meet me tomorrow. We have something big." The next morning he handed me a folder. Inside were photos, bank statements, and legal documents that connected David to a shady man named Victor, a known con artist with a history of fraud. "Your son's working with him," James explained. "Victor helps people fake deaths and forge documents, then takes a cut of the inheritance." I stared at the photos, my hands trembling. My son wasn't just greedy. He had entered into a criminal partnership. Suddenly everything clicked. The staged accident at the cabin, the forged death certificate, the threatening call. David wasn't working alone. That night, as I reviewed the evidence, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." They were watching me. The next day, I decided to take the fight to them. I returned to my house, walked right up to the front door and rang the bell. Claire opened it, her face twisting in disgust. "What do you want, old woman?" she sneered. I smiled coldly. "To remind you that this is still my house." She laughed, but her eyes betrayed fear. Not for long. Before I could respond, David appeared behind her, his face pale. "Mom, this isn't safe for you," he said mockingly. "You should just go away before something bad happens." I stepped closer. "The only bad thing that's going to happen is to you when the world learns what you did." I turned and walked away, but as I reached my car, I noticed a black SUV parked a few houses down. The same SUV I had seen at the cabin. They were following me. That night, while I was at James's house reviewing the final pieces of evidence, a brick crashed through the window with a note tied to it. "Leave town now, or next time it won't be a warning." James grabbed his gun and ran outside, but the SUV sped off into the night. The walls were closing in. The danger was real, but so was my resolve. I knew then that the only way to end this was to expose everything: David, Claire, Victor, and whoever else was behind this conspiracy. The court date was set for 2 weeks. Until then, I had to stay alive. Every day felt like a battle. I moved between safe houses, never staying in one place too long. I carried pepper spray in my bag and kept the recorder close at all times. David tried calling me several times, leaving voicemails that shifted from begging to threatening. "Mom, please, let's talk. You're ruining everything. If you don't stop this, you'll regret it." Each message fueled my determination. Finally, the night before the court hearing, I received one last call, from Victor himself. His voice was cold, almost amused. "You're brave, Martha. I'll give you that. But brave people die too. Stay out of this, or we'll finish what your son started." I hung up without saying a word, my hands shaking. The next morning I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding. James was by my side, and so were the officers he had called for backup. David arrived moments later, looking furious, with Claire clutching his arm like a lifeline. The battle was about to begin. But just as we were about to enter the courtroom, something happened that made my blood run cold. A man stepped out of the black SUV, walked straight toward me and whispered, "This is your last chance to disappear." And then, he opened his coat, revealing something metallic inside. Was it a gun, a threat, or a warning? Before I could react, James pushed me back, yelling for everyone to get inside. The courthouse doors slammed shut behind us. The storm was here. What's inside that coat, and will I live to tell the tale? Stay with me, because in the next chapter, the truth will explode wide open. If you were me, would you risk your life to expose your own child? Comment where you're watching from. I want to know your thoughts. Inside the courthouse, my heart thumped like a drum against my chest. Officers rushed to the door, but by the time they got outside, the man with the SUV was gone. The black vehicle vanished into the city streets like a shadow disappearing at dawn. James turned to me, his face tense. "Martha, they're escalating. You need to stay close to me at all times." I nodded, gripping my cane so tightly my knuckles turned white. Fear twisted in my stomach, but it was swallowed by something stronger, rage. They wanted me scared. They wanted me silent. They were about to find out they picked the wrong grandmother. The courtroom was packed. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, called the session to order. David sat at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly. Claire sat beside him, wearing a mask of innocence. I took my place with James and my attorney. As I sat down, David's eyes met mine. There was no warmth, no love, only hate. The judge began. "We are here to determine the legitimacy of Martha Reynolds' estate and the allegations surrounding the fraudulent declaration of her death." My attorney stood and presented the first piece of evidence, the forged death certificate. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. "Your Honor," he said, "this document was filed by David Reynolds. We have expert testimony confirming the signature is forged, and the attending physician listed does not exist." David shot up. "That's a lie," he shouted. The judge banged her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Reynolds, or I'll hold you in contempt." Next came the voice recordings. The room fell silent as David's own voice filled the air, plotting my death. "She's old. She won't last long. Once she's gone, everything is ours." Claire's voice followed, dripping with venom. "Then make it happen, David. I'm tired of waiting." Claire covered her mouth, her eyes wide, while David turned pale. The judge's face hardened. "Mr. Reynolds, do you have an explanation for this?" David stammered. "That's not me. That's been doctored." But then James stepped forward with the final blow. Security footage from the cabin's gas station, showing David meeting with Victor, handing him a thick envelope. "We have confirmation this man, Victor Hale, is a known fraudster. He has been paid by Mr. Reynolds to falsify documents." The judge leaned back, her expression unreadable. "This is serious evidence. The court will recess for 1 hour while I review it." As the judge left, chaos erupted. David turned to me, his face twisted. "You think you've won, Mom. You have no idea what's coming." Claire hissed at him. "Shut up, David." James placed a hand on my shoulder. "Stay calm. We've got them." But I wasn't calm. Not yet. Something felt wrong. I saw a man slip into the courtroom's back row just before recess. He wore a cap low over his eyes. My gut screamed it was the same man from the SUV. During the break, I went to the restroom, James waiting outside the door. As I washed my hands, the lights flickered. My reflection stared back at me, tired but unbroken. Then, from the stall behind me, I heard a voice. "You're making a mistake, Martha." Froze. Slowly I turned, but the stall door was ajar, empty. My heart raced. Was I imagining things? When I stepped back into the hallway, James was gone. Panic clawed at my chest. "James!" I called, but only silence answered. I hurried down the hall, my cane tapping frantically. Then I saw him. James, pinned against the wall by the man in the cap. The stranger's hand was gripping something shiny, pressed against James's ribs. "Let him go!" I shouted, my voice trembling. The man turned slowly, his face calm, almost amused. "Walk away, Martha. You don't understand who you're up against." I took a step forward. "Try me." For a tense moment, we stood locked in a silent standoff. Then he shoved James away and disappeared into a stairwell. James gasped for breath. "He's sending a message. They won't stop until you're gone." Help James up. "Then we won't stop either." The hour ended, and we returned to the courtroom. The judge re-entered, papers in hand. "After reviewing the evidence," she said, "this court finds substantial proof of fraud and attempted theft. However, before I give my ruling, Mr. Victor Hale must be brought in for questioning." Suddenly, the doors slammed open. Officers dragged in Victor, his hands cuffed. His face was swollen, as if someone had beaten him. Victor sneered at me as he passed. "You think you've won, lady? You're just a pawn. There are bigger players in this game." The judge demanded silence, but his words chilled me. Bigger players. Was someone else pulling the strings? Victor agreed to testify in exchange for a lighter sentence. He spilled everything. How David hired him, how they faked my death, how they planned to sell my house and split the profits. The courtroom erupted in gasps. I felt a mixture of anger and sorrow. My son's betrayal was complete. The judge adjourned for the day, saying the final verdict would be given tomorrow. As we left, David broke free from the officers and lunged at me, screaming, "You ruined me!" Before he could reach me, James tackled him to the ground. I stood there, shaking, as David was dragged away, cursing my name. But Victor's words echoed in my mind. Bigger players in this game. What did he mean? Who else was behind this? That night, I locked every door and window. But as I lay in bed, I saw headlights outside. 2 cars idling, watching. I whispered to myself, "It's not over." Because something told me the final battle wasn't just with David. And I was right. In the next chapter, everything will unravel. The truth, the danger, and the final betrayal I never saw coming. Would you stand and fight if the whole world turned against you? Or would you run? Comment where you're watching from. I want to hear your voice. The morning of the final court session dawned with an eerie stillness. I barely slept, haunted by Victor's words. Bigger players in this game. It wasn't just David and his shady friend. Something larger was at work, and I needed to know who before it was too late. James picked me up early, his jaw tight, eyes scanning every passing car. "We'll have more officers in the courthouse today," he said. "But stay close to me, Martha. Whoever's behind this won't go down without a fight." As we drove, I looked out the window and noticed a black SUV trailing us at a distance. My stomach churned. "They're watching," I murmured. James tightened his grip on the wheel. "Let them watch. Today they'll have nothing left to hide behind." When we arrived, the courthouse was swarming with media. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Reynolds, is it true your son tried to kill you? Do you fear for your life? How does it feel to expose your own child?" I ignored them and walked straight inside. My cane clicked with every determined step. Inside, the tension was unbearable. David sat at the defendant's table. His eyes wild, his suit wrinkled, his hands cuffed. Claire was nowhere to be seen. My attorney whispered, "She didn't show up. She's probably trying to save herself." The judge entered, and the room fell silent. "Before we proceed," she said, "the court has received new evidence from law enforcement regarding this case." James stood and handed over a folder. The judge opened it, her brows furrowing as she read. "It appears," she said slowly, "that Mr. Victor Hale has confessed to working for a third party, someone named Arthur King." My heart skipped. That name was unfamiliar, but James whispered. He's a businessman with ties to illegal property acquisitions. Ruthless. He buys properties cheap, by any means necessary. The judge continued. Evidence shows that Arthur King paid Victor to arrange Mrs. Reynolds' death so her property could be sold quickly and laundered through his company. Mr. Reynolds' involvement was motivated by greed, but this King orchestrated the entire scheme. The courtroom erupted. David shouted, "No, that's not true. I was in control, not him." But his outburst only confirmed his desperation. The judge called for order. "Officers, bring Mr. King in." The doors opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit walked in, handcuffed, with a smug smile on his face. His cold blue eyes scanned the room and landed on me. He smirked as if to say, "You think you've won?" As he took the stand, he leaned forward. "You're impressive, Mrs. Reynolds," he said. "Most people in your position wouldn't have survived this long." I stared back, my voice steady. "You underestimated me." The judge questioned him, and Arthur's arrogance spilled over. He admitted to manipulating David, promising him a fortune in exchange for my house. "I told him," Arthur said. "All he had to do was make sure you were gone. Permanently." David's face twisted. "You set me up," he screamed. Arthur laughed. "No, David. You set yourself up the moment you betrayed your own mother." The courtroom was electric with tension. My heart ached hearing how deep the betrayal went, but I held my head high. The judge banged her gavel. "Given the evidence, this court finds Mr. David Reynolds guilty of attempted fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Mr. Arthur King is found guilty of orchestrating these crimes. Sentencing will follow." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Arthur leaned closer to me as they led him away. "This isn't over, Martha. I have people on the outside. Watch your back." The officers pulled him back, but his words chilled me. After court, James drove me to a safe house. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. "We can't risk any surprises." But surprises were already waiting. That night, as I prepared for bed, the power went out. The room plunged into darkness. My phone buzzed with a message. "You can't hide forever." I froze, listening to the creak of footsteps outside. My hand trembled as I dialed James, but before he could answer, the window shattered. A masked figure climbed in, lunging toward me. I grabbed my cane and swung with all my strength, hitting him square in the head. He stumbled back, groaning, but another figure appeared at the door. Just as panic rose in my throat, James burst in with his gun drawn. "Police! Drop it!" The intruders fled through the broken window, disappearing into the night. James knelt beside me. "Are you okay?" I nodded, my body shaking. "They're not stopping, James. They'll keep coming." He helped me up, his voice firm. "Then we'll be ready for them. I promise you, Martha, we'll end this." But deep down, I knew the war wasn't over. The courtroom victory had only enraged them. The bigger fight was just beginning. And the next move, it was mine. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how I turned their final trap into my greatest weapon. If you were in my shoes, would you run or fight until the end? Comment where you're watching from. I need to hear what you do. By the next morning, I was a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. The attack at the safe house confirmed what I already knew. They wouldn't stop until I was dead. But instead of breaking me, it ignited a fire inside me. I had survived their attempts twice, and now it was time to strike back. James was furious. "Martha, they're escalating. You need to stay hidden until we can round them all up." I shook my head. "No, James. Hiding hasn't worked. They keep finding me. The only way to end this is to make them believe they've won, and then take everything back." His brows furrowed. "What do you have in mind?" A plan had been forming in my head all night. I leaned closer. "We're going to let them think I'm vulnerable. I'll set a trap, and when they walk into it, they'll regret ever touching me." With the help of the authorities, we arranged a fake transfer of my property, leaking false information that I was moving everything into a new account. The bait was set. We knew Arthur's remaining men would take it. That evening, I returned to my house for the first time in months. The place felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories of betrayal. The scent of roses mixed with the dust of neglect. I ran my hand over the banister, whispering, "I'm home." The officers hid outside, disguised in unmarked cars. James stayed with me inside, ready for whatever was coming. Hours passed. Silence. Then, around midnight, headlights cut through the darkness. 2 black SUVs pulled up quietly, their engines rumbling. I tightened my grip on my cane, my heart pounding like a war drum. James whispered, "They're here." The men stormed the house, masked and armed, thinking they would catch me off guard. But instead of finding a helpless old woman, they walked straight into a trap. The lights blazed on, officers surrounded the house, and guns were drawn. "Freeze! You're surrounded." Chaos erupted. The intruders tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run. One of them aimed at me, and before I could react, James tackled him to the floor. Another man bolted toward the back door, only to be taken down by officers waiting outside. As they were dragged away, one of them snarled at me, "You don't understand, lady. Arthur wasn't the only one. There are more." More. My chest tightened. Who else could be behind this? The ringleader, a tall man with piercing eyes, spat on the floor. "You think this is over? You've only made enemies you can't even see." James hauled him up. "Save it for the judge." As the officers took them away, I felt both relief and dread. Relief that I had survived another night. Dread because their threats hinted at something bigger. The next day, I went back to court for sentencing. The judge was firm. "David Reynolds, for your crimes of attempted fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder, you are sentenced to 25 years in prison without parole." David's face contorted with rage. "Mom, please. You can't let them do this to me. I'm your son." I met his gaze, my heart aching. "You stopped being my son the day you left me to die." He screamed as officers dragged him away, cursing me. I didn't flinch. Arthur King's sentencing followed. Life in prison. He smirked at me one last time as he was escorted out. His voice low but chilling. "Enjoy your victory, Martha. You won't hold it for long." I walked out of the courtroom feeling both powerful and broken. The media swarmed me again, but I had no words for them. My battle wasn't over. That night, as I sat on my porch sipping tea, I finally allowed myself to breathe. For the first time in months, I felt a sliver of peace. But then my phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen. "Your fight isn't with us anymore. It's with the ones you don't even see. Sleep well, Martha, while you still can." My hand trembled as I set the phone down. The war wasn't over. It was evolving. And if I wanted to survive, I had to be smarter than ever. In the next chapter, I'll show you how I uncovered the shadowy figures behind it all, and how I prepared for the deadliest confrontation of my life. Would you have the strength to keep fighting if danger kept knocking on your door? Comment where you're watching from. I need to know if you'd stand as I do. I didn't sleep that night. The message on my phone replayed in my mind like a warning bell I couldn't shut off. "Your fight isn't with us anymore. It's with the ones you don't even see." Those words haunted me because they meant this was far bigger than I thought. The next morning, James came by with a grim look on his face. "Martha, we traced that message. Came from an encrypted server. Whoever sent it is covering their tracks. These aren't just street thugs. They're professionals." I poured us coffee, my hands trembling only slightly. "What do they want, James? My house? My money? Or is it just about power now?" He sighed. "It's both. You embarrassed them. When you survived, you exposed cracks in their network. They won't stop until you're either dead or ruined." I looked out the window at my roses, now blooming after months of neglect. "Then let them come," I said quietly. "I've got nothing left to lose but my life, and I'm not handing it over easily." That afternoon I started preparing. I installed more cameras around the house, reinforced the locks, and even carried a small taser James gave me. But I knew this wasn't just about defending myself. It was about striking back. James and I started digging into Arthur King's records, tracing every business partner, every deal. What we found made my stomach turn. His company had ties to corrupt politicians, shady real estate investors, and a network of men who thrived on stealing homes from vulnerable people. My house wasn't just another property. It was a piece of a bigger puzzle they were trying to control. One name kept appearing: Lawrence Pierce. A powerful businessman with influence in the city, the kind of man who could make people disappear with a single phone call. He was the one funding Arthur, the one who ordered my death. That night I received another call. Smooth voice spoke. "Mrs. Reynolds, I admire your resilience. But this ends now. Tomorrow you'll sign over your property, or you won't live to see the next sunrise." Froze. "And if I don't?" The voice chuckled. "Then your house won't be the only thing we burn down." The line went dead. I sat there, trembling, staring at the phone. They had threatened my life before, but now they were threatening everyone I cared about. James came back with a plan. "We can't wait for them to strike again. Tomorrow we set up a sting. You'll meet them, hand over fake documents, and we'll record everything." My heart pounded. What if they try to kill me? He met my eyes. "Then we'll be ready to kill this case for good." The next evening, we arranged the meeting in an abandoned warehouse, the location they demanded. I walked in alone, my cane steady, my head held high. Hidden cameras were everywhere, and James was nearby with officers, ready to intervene. Lawrence Pierce stood at the center of the room, a tall man with a cold smile. "You came," he said, almost pleasantly. "I'm not afraid of you," I replied. He chuckled. "You should be." Behind him, two armed men stepped forward. "Do you have the papers?" I held up the folder. "Here they are. Signatures, everything you wanted. But you'll need to sign something too." He frowned. "What?" "A confession," I said boldly. His face darkened. "You've got guts, old woman. Pity they won't save you." The men moved closer, but before they could grab me, James's voice rang out. "Police! Drop your weapons." Officers stormed in, guns drawn. Chaos erupted. One of the men fired a shot, missing me by inches, shattering a window. I ducked behind a crate as officers returned fire. Lawrence tried to run, but James tackled him to the ground. When the smoke cleared, they were all in handcuffs. Lawrence sneered at me as they dragged him away. "You may have won this battle, Martha, but wars don't end with one fight." I stood tall. "Maybe not. But you just lost yours." Back at home, I thought it was finally over. The leaders were in jail, the network exposed. The police assured me I was safe. But that night, as I sat in my living room sipping tea, the phone rang again. I hesitated before answering. A whisper came through the line. "We're still watching you. This isn't the end." I dropped the phone, my hands shaking. Even in victory, the shadows were still there. I walked to my window and closed the curtains, my heart pounding. I knew what I had to do next. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking back control completely. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how I turned from prey to hunter, and how I plan to bring down the last remnants of the people who tried to bury me. If you were in my place, would you keep living in fear, or would you fight until your last breath? Comment where you're watching from. Your thoughts matter to me. When morning came, the world outside looked calm, but inside me a storm raged. I knew now that simply exposing them wasn't enough. As long as even one of their shadows remained, I would never be free. They had turned my life into a battlefield, and I had only two choices: hide forever or fight to the very end. James arrived early with an envelope. "Martha," he said, "we've traced the last remnants of Lawrence's network. There's a safe house on the outskirts of town where some of his men are regrouping. They've been talking about finishing what he started." I stared at the envelope, my hand steady. "Then we end this tonight." James frowned. "It's dangerous." So is breathing around these people, I said coldly. I won't spend my last years looking over my shoulder. That afternoon I prepared. Not just physically but mentally. I wrote a letter. One that said everything I needed to say in case I didn't come back. I left it on the kitchen table, next to a picture of me and my late husband. Then I packed the evidence I had gathered, my phone, and the small taser James had given me. The safe house was an abandoned factory on the edge of the city, surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusted gates. We arrived at dusk, the sky painted in fiery reds and oranges, a fitting backdrop for what was about to happen. James and a team of officers set up around the perimeter. You'll go in first, he said. We'll be right behind you. Get them talking, get them angry. We'll record everything. I walked inside, the air heavy with the smell of oil and dust. Shadows shifted in the dim light. And then they stepped out. 3 men, all armed, their faces hard. So the old woman came to us. One of them sneered. You've got more courage than brains. I stood tall, my cane planted firmly. You've been chasing me for months. Here I am. What now? The leader, a scarred man with cold eyes, smirked. Now we finish what we started. You should have just signed everything over. I chuckled softly, even as my heart pounded. You think this is about my house? My money? Well, this is about me showing you that no matter how powerful you think you are, you can't break me. He raised his gun. You won't leave here alive. Before he could pull the trigger, red lights flashed across the walls, laser sights from the officers. Drop your weapons, James shouted. The men hesitated, but instead of surrendering, they fired. Gunshots echoed, glass shattered. I ducked behind an old metal cabinet as officers stormed in. The firefight was brief but brutal. 2 of the men were taken down, and the leader was pinned to the ground, handcuffed and screaming. As they dragged him away, he spat at me. You think this is the end? There are others. They'll come for you. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. Let them come. I'll be ready. Back home, the weight of what happened settled on my shoulders. For the first time in months, the night was quiet. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the final act was still ahead of me. The next morning James brought news. We got them all. The network is dismantled. You're safe now. But something in his tone told me he didn't believe it completely. Neither did I. Later that day, as I walked through my garden, I found a small box on my porch. My heart skipped. Inside was a single bullet, and a note. We're not finished, Martha. I stared at it, my blood running cold. Whoever sent it wanted me to know they were still out there. Watching. Waiting. Instead of fear, I felt something else rise inside me. Strength. They wanted me scared, but they'd only made me more determined. That night, I stood in front of my mirror and said out loud, You didn't bury me when you had the chance. You won't bury me now. The next morning I contacted the media. If they were going to keep coming, I would make sure the whole world knew who they were. Cameras, interviews, the truth. Everything was going public. By evening my story was everywhere. Headlines screamed, Grandmother survives murder plot by own son. Exposes criminal network. The public outcry was overwhelming. People reached out to me, strangers sending messages of support. For the first time I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. But the enemy was still moving. That night, as I prepared for bed, my security cameras picked up movement in the driveway. A figure in black walked toward the house slowly, deliberately. I grabbed my cane and my phone, my heart pounding. The figure stopped at the porch, looked directly into the camera, and held up a sign. Tomorrow night. Ends. Froze. They were giving me a warning, a challenge. This was it, the final confrontation. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how I faced them one last time, how I stood my ground when the darkness came to my door, and how I ended this nightmare once and for all. If you were me, would you stay and fight, or would you run far away? Comment where you're watching from. I want to know if you'd have the courage to face them. The night they promised to come, the air felt different. Heavy, charged, almost electric. Every sound outside made my pulse race. Every shadow seemed to move on its own. But I wasn't leaving. I had lived my entire life standing up for what I believed in, and I wasn't going to die running. James wanted me moved to a secure location, but I refused. "This is my home," I told him. "They tried to take it from me once. If they want me, they'll have to come here." He looked at me like a man torn between duty and fear. "Then we'll fight with you." We prepared the house like a fortress. Cameras covered every angle. Officers were hidden nearby, and I armed myself with a taser, pepper spray, and my cane. Inside, I dimmed the lights and waited. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Silence. And then headlights. A single black SUV rolled up the driveway, slow, deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. My heart thudded in my chest, but I stood tall by the window. The door creaked open, and a man stepped out. Not masked, not hiding. He walked up my porch steps with confidence. I opened the door before he could knock. "You're late," I said. He smirked. "You're braver than I expected, Martha." Behind him, 2 more men emerged from the SUV, guns hidden under their coats. But before they could take another step, James's voice boomed from the shadows. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Floodlights snapped on, blinding them. Officers swarmed from all sides, guns drawn. The men froze, then raised their weapons anyway. Gunfire erupted, sharp and deafening. I ducked behind the doorframe as officers returned fire. 1 man fell, the other was pinned down. The leader, however, slipped past the chaos and into my house. My heart stopped when I heard the door slam behind him. I grabbed my cane and the taser, stepping slowly into the hallway. He was there, standing in the dim light, gun raised at me. "It's over," he said. "You should have stayed dead." I met his eyes, unflinching. "And you should have stayed in the shadows where cowards belong." He took a step forward. "Any last words, old woman?" I gripped my cane, my voice steady. "Yes. You forgot one thing, this is my house." At that moment, James burst in from the back door, tackling the man. The gun went off, the bullet missing me by inches. Officers stormed in, wrestling the leader to the ground, handcuffing him as he cursed and spat. I stood there, trembling but victorious. It was finally over. Hours later, as dawn broke, James sat with me on the porch. "You did it, Martha. You survived." Tears welled in my eyes. "No, James. We did it." The leader and his men were taken away, their network dismantled completely. David remained in prison, his empire of lies shattered. Arthur King was serving his life sentence, powerless behind bars. For the first time in months, the sun rose over my house without fear. The roses in my garden glistened with dew, alive and thriving, just like me. I looked into the camera crew that had gathered outside later that day and said, "They tried to bury me, but they forgot I'm a seed. I grow back stronger." My story spread across the country, a beacon of hope for anyone who had been betrayed, abused, or underestimated. People called me a hero, but I wasn't. I was just a woman who refused to die quietly. That night I sat in my rocking chair, sipping tea, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. The shadows were gone. The war was finally over. But as I stared at the horizon, I realized the most important thing of all. Sometimes the greatest battles we fight are not with others, but with ourselves. Fear is powerful, but courage is stronger. To anyone listening to my story right now, remember this. Never let anyone decide when your story ends. You hold the pen. You write the ending. And I wrote mine in bold, unshakable ink. Thank you for standing with me through this fight. Tell me, if someone tried to take everything from you, would you rise or fall? Comment where you're watching from and share your own strength. 'Cause your story matters too.